Okay, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Chard, and I'm the Dean of the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development here at Boston University. And we're very excited to be starting this new event series that will bring hot topics, discussions with scholars and leaders here at BU Wheelock and in our community to talk about are sort of important issues that we feel are germane to our interests as educators and human development professionals. I know we have a number of alumni and supporters from across the country who are joining us today, so welcome to you all for being here. This series is rooted in our ongoing efforts to make systems in education and human development more equitable and just. The discussions that we'll formulate will focus on the complexity of the issue and seek to uncover the transformational opportunities for us to see students and our communities thrive. So at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about some of the upcoming webinars that we hope you will join. But we're starting today with the topic of early childhood education. And this, of course, was really the beginning motivation of Wheelock College back in the late 1800s when Lucy Wheelock opened the Wheelock Kindergarten Training School. So what a fitting topic for us to begin with today. In October, our Governor Healy, and the House and Senate here in Massachusetts finalized the FY24 state budget. This budget includes $1.5 billion for early education and care, 22%, that marks a 22% increase over FY23 funding. By doing that, as suggested by Secretary of Education Patrick Tutwiler, the state is making, as he calls it, quote, a values-based statement about the ability of families to access high-quality childcare in the Commonwealth. As with many things, the pandemic has taught us that really opened up our collective awareness around the importance of early childhood education and care. Not news for most of you on this call, but not only for its inherent value, as it has been for forever for children and families, but also for the larger context of our society and economy. So today we're going to talk about what those new investments signal and the potential and next steps for the state of Massachusetts. I'm joined this afternoon by two of my favorite people, two leading experts in the early childhood field, both part of the faculty here at Boston University's Wheelock College. So let me introduce each of them, and they'll come on and join me in our conversation. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephanie Curenton. Stephanie is a professor in the Teaching and Learning Department at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. Also has an appointment in education leadership and policy studies. And she is the director of the Center on the Ecology of Early Development, or what we fondly call SEED. She is a developmental and community psychologist who studies the social, cognitive, and language development of racially marginalized children with various ecological contexts such as parent-child interactions, early childhood care and education, professional development interventions for early childhood workforce, and related state and federal policies designed to promote the positive development and health of young children. In 2022, Dr. Curenton was named as a board member on the Massachusetts Board of Early Education and Care for our state. Joining her is Amy O'Leary, a faculty member also in the Teaching and Learning Department and teaches primarily in our Early Childhood Leadership, Policy, and Advocacy Master's Program. Ms. O'Leary is also the Executive Director of Strategies for Children, an advocacy and policy organization that works to ensure that Massachusetts invests the resources needed for all children from birth to age 5 to access high-quality early education and care. She joined Strategies for Children in 2002, and before that, she worked as a preschool teacher and program director at Ellis Early Learning in the South End here in Boston. I'm crazy excited to have both of you on the call and very interested in our conversation. And I feel very fortunate that we have you here at BU Wheelock as part of our scholarship, leadership, and advocacy efforts. So let's jump in. I also want to be sure you know if you're in the audience we'll reserve time for questions, but we want to get at some questions that Amy and Stephanie will both address directly. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and we have folks monitoring that so we can make sure to select questions that are particularly relevant to the broad audience of folks who are joining us today. So let's get started. So Massachusetts increased these investments in this area. Really, those seem to underscore the value proposition. So I'd love to talk first about your view on how these funds are being directed and where you see the potential. Amy, why don't you get us started?
Sure, thanks so much. It's so great to be here with you and my colleague and good friend, Stephanie Curenton. And Stephanie, actually, we first met when we both were on the National Association for the Education of Young Children Governing Board back in the day. So it's great to be part of BU and under your leadership and to be here today to talk about these important issues. And I think as we think about the investments now, just backing up a little bit, when you think about historically, early education and care has seemed to be undervalued, underfunded, overlooked. The historical data of the dollars that have been invested. Oftentimes, we hear folks who are doing the work every day say we're usually trying to do more with less. Because when we're working with children and families, who kind of show up every morning, there isn't much choice about kind of how your day is going to go. I think and you mentioned it, since COVID happened. And if you think back to March 2020, all of the systems that we kind of take for granted suddenly became urgent and much more important in our daily lives, including childcare and early education. And like most of the country, Massachusetts closed down our childcare programs and reopened in an emergency program. And what I will tell you is during that time, the unity and the community that was built, not just with the folks that have been doing the work every day, but policymakers and funders and elected officials and higher ed folks that are interested in these issues, we really were able to come together and think about the solutions. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts in our mindset is how do we kind of move from we need more to we need more, and here's the solution for that. So for me as an advocate for the past 20 years, to see that unity, to see that expression of how we put children and families first, but how we also think about the people that are doing the work every day. And we have to say that in Massachusetts, our elected officials made decisions that saved people's lives. It may sound dramatic, but the support that we had from our state legislator, from Governor Baker at the time, and now Governor Healy, has just changed the trajectory of the way that we think about funding early education and care. Among the highlights of that $1.5 billion budget are operational grants that are going to over 90% of programs in Massachusetts, both center-based and family child care providers that have really kept for the past 3 years folks operating. We think about kind of this emergency moving to growth. And what we have seen is these grants have made an incredible difference in delaying parent tuition increases, in supporting our early educators and family child care providers doing the work. And it's really the first time that we have had funding across the board going to all programs in Massachusetts. We also doubled down on supporting our most vulnerable children and families. So really supporting parents. The Department of Early Education and Care has overhauled its financial assistance. Really, as Commissioner Kershaw would say, is bringing dignity back to supporting children and families who need the support. When we think about birth to 5, it's such a short time in your life, but we also know how critical those years are. So really thinking strategically about how to best support programs across the Commonwealth through funding. We've really been able to see a difference. We've seen a drop in the turnover rate. To be clear, there is still a workforce crisis, which we've been saying for decades, but we know that the funding that has been allocated has made a difference. We also know at the national level, Massachusetts is in a very different position compared to most states because our legislature fully funded with state dollars these federal grants. We saw other states that kind of stopped support, and we've seen the dramatic impacts of that. We've also seen communities come together to think about how to best serve, and the legislature and I think elected officials overall really understand the complex and complicated funding schemes that we often have in early education and care.
Stephanie, anything you want to add? I know you, being on the board of the Department of Early Education and Care, have the uses of these funds, has that been, I mean, would you support Amy's thoughts that this is really carefully being thought out and how it's structured and supports families and children?
Yes, definitely, I would. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to bring some of the details around what the state is planning to do with those dollars. So in fiscal year 2024, that is coming up for us, there are a few priorities that that EEC is making. One is really, as Amy was saying, making childcare more accessible to families in an equitable way. Some of the way in which they're doing that is really reaching out and working with those children who are in the Department of DCF, Department of Transitional Assistance and Homelessness. So those children will automatically be eligible if they are in those, if they have connection with those types of departments, or if they're facing homelessness. The other priority is really around improving program quality with a specific focus on cultural responsiveness and equity and trauma-informed care. Some of the efforts around that is really taking a portion of that money, about $5 million, and using it for mental health consultation for early childhood programs. And also thinking about how we go about understanding what quality is and looking at quality from the point of view of the children that we are serving, all children that we are serving, including the children of color, children who are culturally and linguistically diverse, etc. Another big priority area is what EEC is calling maintaining program stability. And that's really a lot of efforts that are targeted towards shoring up the market. And so there's $475 million that is slated to go to what's called C3, Commonwealth Cares for Children. There's about 4 million that is really going to increase the subsidy rates. And this 45 million is in addition to the $80 million rate increase that we had last year. There's also about $8.5 million targeted to the early education and out of school time capital investment. And so you can see that the funds are really sort of broken down across a lot of strategic priority areas within EEC that are being really thought out carefully. And another thing that I would just echo from what Amy said is that another big thing that we are thinking critically about is how to make sure that family child care providers are also at the table to be able to receive some of these financial benefits that are out there.
Break that down, Stephanie, for us, of family childcare providers. Why is that different than, like, what does that mean? Because there may be people in the audience who don't distinguish.
Yeah, sure. So center-based providers can be thought of as childcare that is in a center. So you go into a center that's within a community and there are different classrooms, and it is a specific sort of place that is completely dedicated to that, offering childcare services. When we say family childcare providers, what we're really talking about are people who have dedicated their lives and their homes to providing care to a smaller number of children. And what's interesting about our market in the state is that the majority of our slots, our childcare slots, are actually those family childcare slots. And so that's really, really important for us to make sure that those types of providers are included in this, like these efforts and the conversations that we have going forward.
Interesting. So it sounds like there are a number of things here. One is, and I'm curious, Amy, because I know of your work in advocacy, this advocacy for state funding, is it ever permanent? I mean, is work you have to continue annually to get this kind of support for the kinds of costs that we know exist and what's required to provide quality childcare? That's one question. I'll come back with others after you've had a chance to respond to that.
Sure. I think so. In Massachusetts, our legislature is a full-time legislature. Our legislative session is 2 years. So
Oh,
for bills, we have 2 years for them to become law. But we have an annual budget process. So we are right now, believe it or not, gearing up for the next fiscal year 25, where Governor Healy will release her budget proposal the fourth Wednesday of January. So right now, it is a yearly kind of advocacy effort and campaign to ensure funding for all of the things that we need funding for. We are also working with the Common Start Coalition, which has filed legislation for this session to really have this long-term view, this permanent policy to really ensure universal access to childcare for Massachusetts. But you're right on that every year we need to think about how the dollars are being implemented. I think one of the biggest pieces of things that I'm excited about is as we've come out of COVID, there has been this kind of joint budget making process. So the field has really weighed in to kind of the policy and the funding. And they have been able to articulate about what this funding means. They've been able to show their programmatic budgets about how the funding is making a difference. So I think kind of having both of those perspectives, how the money is happening, out in the field and what it means for the state has been critical to really improving the way that funds are getting out to the children and families and the programs in Massachusetts.
that's great. That's good to hear. I just think it's important for the audience to understand that without advocates and experts pushing regularly on the funding piece of this, we can revert back to looking at early childhood educational experiences as unimportant and not of high priority. There's been a question in the Q&A about implementation, which I want to ask you both to talk about a little bit. What are the strategies to reach out to marginalized and children who are homeless, for example, and their families? Like how does the state go about doing that in a way that's sensitive and also effective? Stephanie, you want to?
Yeah. So one of the strategies is sort of this automatic eligibility. So if we have children who are living in those situations and who are affiliated with some of the other departments, they will automatically have eligibility. So that decreases, the paperwork, that decreases sort of all the bureaucracy for families before they get enrolled in different programs. So that's one of the ways in which they're really thinking about how to make things more equitable. The other thing that the state is really doing that will help our equity of access is we are engaging in an alternative methodology to determine our market rate. And so we're one of the few states that have been given a waiver from the Office of Child Care to engage in this alternative methodology. And the goal is to sort of write up our market rate in the sense that so that we don't have a big disparity across the state in terms of our rate, and so that it's more reflective of the true cost of care that is across our state.
Interesting. Amy, any follow-up to that?
I think there was actually, I'll try to find the link while we're on. Commissioner Kershaw had a piece in the Commonwealth magazine, which I just remembered as we were talking about this question, talking about the new approach to financial assistance. I also think when you think about the migrant crisis, when you think about what children and families need, right? Our Department of Early Education and Care is right there working with partners in the community. They just announced an initiative today around working with neighborhood villages, Cradles to Crayons, to really think about how are we best meeting the needs right now of children and families who are facing homelessness and in the migrant crisis. So I think this idea of being planful and really having a vision for what we want for children and families while able to also respond immediately to critical needs is so important. And we know that the people on the ground who are almost doing this invisible work, who they are like every day supporting children and families in their own programs and thinking about their communities, it's going to take all of us. But I do think having policymakers understand why we need this funding, the service that we're providing, and kind of how it connects to all of our bigger systems is really important.
Yeah. And I'll just
Yeah, please.
Oh, I'll just echo something to that too, because we always have to remember that policy making doesn't just happen, on the Hill. Their policy implementation is very critical. And so I like to encourage advocates to watch, to make sure that these funds are being used and implemented in a way that is going to be helpful to the children and families that we're here to serve.
So there's a question about one more kind of vulnerability in the early childhood population. That is children who have disabilities, or there may be a concern about the possibility of a disability. And not to equate the two, but also there's a question about mental health services. And I'm just curious if both of you or one of you might speak to because there are long waiting periods to get diagnosed, and I think it's a bit of a puzzle for families to figure out how to access mental health services, but also inclusive programs for children with disabilities. So who would like to jump on that one?
So I can start with that one. And one of the things that is planned is a source of funding that will go towards mental health consultation services and ECE programs. Those services will allow the programs to respond to children and families' needs right there in the program, context. So it gives people access to some help and supports that they need in a place that they're familiar with.
I would also add some of the work that we've been doing at Strategies for Children, kind of in recognition of this opportunity we have, is last fall we launched our early childhood agenda, which really was about getting over 1,000 people's input and feedback about where we should be focusing our energy. And this interconnectedness of web of support around early intervention, around a handoff to a school district, around mental health services has showed up in many different of the priorities that were set forth in the early childhood agenda. I think, especially in the Healy Driscoll administration, we have heard this across, in education, in health and human services. So understanding kind of where these issues show up for children and families, what does the support look like? What's the referral network? And then kind of how do we kind of collect all that data and information so that we can have this continuous loop of improvement? It's been incredible. Again, it's this local infrastructure that we are working toward that can help to really have this bird's eye view, but then this local level of support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to. So I have a personal interest in the quality of caregivers, right? The standards of care and what we expect, and I know part of having quality caregivers means they're getting paid appropriately, and we also have ways to support their own livelihoods. And I've read recently about a program in Kentucky that provides free childcare to early childhood teachers. This seems like it's having a promising result in attracting people to the field. We also know the cost of getting certified to be an early childhood provider is prohibitive for many people. Just curious what barriers and opportunities you see for higher education, for DEC, to kind of make a difference in that area, pipeline development and improving the quality of care, for example, in the family care giving area. Amy, you want to start there, and then Stephanie?
Sure. So we were inspired by the work happening in Kentucky, and we do have a pilot in Massachusetts where the legislature came up with a pilot program to move early educators to the top of the wait list for a subsidy for their own children. And we have seen the resource and referral network get those referrals, get support to those educators, because that's what they were hearing from directors. I need to hire staff and they need childcare for their own children. So we are in the second year of that pilot. It has been wildly successful. It's also, I think, the C3 grants that we've been talking about. We know that those dollars have gone to support educators and bonuses. To your annual question, it's hard to build that into your budget if we have to keep fighting for it year to year. So that's something that we are working on. And I think the other piece around the C3 grants that has been so exciting is this real-time data collection. programs are reporting data to the state so that we now have a much better idea and picture of the monthly kind of how the dollars are getting spent, where the gaps are. That as an advocate, we need data. We need to be able to make the case, and this has been a historically hard. It's been hard to get that kind of data. So that I think will also help us build the case and really show the difference and the impact for these dollars.
Stephanie, anything to add? And I'm particularly interested in both of your experience with other states. Like, I think there's risk, of course, in our being too myopic and not learning from what's working in other places. And please jump in.
So Amy stole my thunder because I also wanted to tout the early education and care program that we have that is much like Kentucky's. We're reaching 1,500 children and families and doing that work. And I also iterate again that those C3 funds are being made available not just to center-based providers, but also being made available to family child care providers as well. So I think that those are two really positive things that we're doing in relation to those two aspects.
It's good.
I would also add about the higher ed pipeline. I've been so excited to be part of the new program, the new master's program at BU. To really, I'm teaching the course where students have an intern project, an intern site, and then we talk about the theory connected to leadership, policy, and advocacy. And I'm so hopeful about kind of the next generation of folks who are studying this and higher education responding and having programs like this dedicated to child well-being. I think it was brilliant that BU really extended it. I'm seeing the experience in my class. We had our last class last night. And two of the students, we have one lawyer who's in the program in my class, and another one who wants to go to law school. And just to bring those perspectives, experience, we need good child advocates across the spectrum in many different industries. And I think this master's program really helps people think a little bit broadly and get that base of what we need to know about young children, and then what the policies need to be to support them.
Yeah, so let's go back to my question about other practices nationally or internationally that you all have observed that you hope that this kind of funding might actually stimulate change. I'm assuming there are areas where you would both say, boy, if only we could do X, or if only we could implement Y.
Right. In some ways, Massachusetts is a leader in so many of these areas. I was at a national meeting with my colleagues at the Alliance for Early Success, which funds 50 states advocacy organizations. And we heard from many different states who are grappling with the same issues. But one of my favorite comments that came out is, we are gratified but not satisfied with the progress we have made. And I think that might be our tagline for our budget advocacy. We also know places like Washington, D.C. have really put a lot of what we are thinking about in motion. We have so many lessons learned from Washington, D.C., from New Mexico is another place where they really have had the leadership to really make some of the changes that they are focused on. I saw something about California. We know folks from California just visited Boston and New Jersey to look at our Boston Universal Pre-Kindergarten program. So I think what we typically say is no state has it all 100% done, and there are many lessons learned. It's exciting to think also about the federal level. President Biden did propose $16 billion to kind of help programs because of this child care cliff that was going to be happening because of the cutoff of the federal dollars. In Massachusetts, we wrote a letter to our delegation with over 800 people and organizations signed on. So we've also worked with colleagues in New York and Maine and other legislators in key negotiating positions so that we can make sure we can't take anything for granted. We have incredibly supportive federal delegation, but we have to make sure that they are hearing from us as well.
Interesting. Stephanie, one of the questions in the Q&A is about multilingual programs. And as we know, linguistic diversity in the Commonwealth is top of mind for educators and certainly for families who do not speak English as their first language. what efforts are there to provide multilingual preparation for caregivers? And again, are there things we could learn from other states that have maybe had more time to think about this than we have?
Yeah. I think that when I think about the multilingual children and families, I really see this as a place in where the universities can can be very instrumental and lead sort of that pipeline development in terms of the workforce, in terms of how we train the future generation of workforce and support and recruit bilingual educators. But I also see it in terms of the universities can share so much knowledge, research knowledge about how we should go about providing those services and what that professional learning should be about. And I think that, again, here in at Wheelock, we are actually some of the leaders in research related to that. In our center, our institute, actually, that's the Institute for Early Childhood Wellbeing. That institute is led by Dina Castro, who's one of the nation's leaders in dual language learner development and policy and workforce development. At the Center for Early Education at the Seed Center, we also do much research and we also have a research program that is focused on dual language learners, particularly Spanish-speaking dual language learners, and professional development for early childhood providers in that realm. And so I really think that the way I see it is that the universities can be instrumental in that, because we need more knowledge about what is the best way to deliver that type of education. And the researchers are working on that and answering those questions and actively engaged in sharing that knowledge with real programs, with real providers. I know in our center, we're working with a Jumpstart program on professional development related to oral language development for bilingual children. And I think that the Institute of Early Childhood Wellbeing is working with Boston Public Schools, as well.
That's great. I want to point out there's a comment in the Q&A about the important role community colleges have to play in the pipeline development and the preparation of strong early childhood providers. And thank you for that comment. And if we leave out community college in our words, it's not in our thoughts, because we have great partnerships with the community college programs and are working hard to both surface those that are doing really great work in various types of models for preparation as well. Amy, there's a kind of a steady stream of questions in the Q&A about wage disparities or salary disparities for early childhood providers and elementary school teachers, which I think probably has something to do with credentialing but also just the history of neglect of the early years. But how do you see this $1.5 billion in future investments focused on that? And I know this is an issue that the commissioner has talked about as well.
Absolutely. And thank you for the questions. I think, it's something I've been working on my entire career as someone who started in a preschool classroom with a BA. It was the 90s, but I made $16,000. Part of the challenge, which we know, is K-12 is a public good. We haven't quite gotten that yet for early education and care. It's still mostly funded through parents and tuition. Even, we have a subsidy system in Massachusetts, but we know there are more children eligible than that. So I think the work of Common Start, the work of many of us over the past few decades, has been about shifting our mindset to that, to really thinking about what does public investment look like for young children. And I think with some of the innovations that we were able to kind of practice and try out during COVID, we were really able to see just a little bit of a shift of priority or eligibility has made a big difference. We also know that we're seeing, apprenticeship programs, meaningful apprenticeship programs happen across the Commonwealth. The Good Jobs Challenge grant, where Boston is the only federal grant from the Department of Commerce, at U.S. Department of Commerce, that has included childcare in this Good Jobs Challenge. So I think for the first time in my career, I am very optimistic by the awareness and kind of the solutions that we're trying to develop to address compensation. I think awareness is a really key part. I think most people did not know the actual numbers. So we've encouraged programs to talk about what the salaries are, how much a percentage of their total budget is that. I think there was a lot of shame because of course nobody wants to pay people low salaries, but you know, with the financial model just does not work. And to better understand that, think about where the leverage points are. I think right now, the University of Massachusetts worked on a study to think about moving some of this burden from parents to public dollars. We know, I saw a question from Clarence about like, is there a costing out model? I think we know so much more about what the inputs are to this cost model. And I think as advocates, we have also gotten braver to talk about the real numbers of what we're going to need, instead of kind of, while we appreciate the need for incremental progress, we need to put our big vision out there.
Yeah, you remind me, I worked in a state at one point that actually considered ending grade 12 and funneling all of the cost of grade 12 to pre-K programs, cannibalizing educational opportunities for students to pay for other educational opportunities for students is not the way for us to think about, as you called it,
Right.
the public good. Nevertheless, a bold idea, right? And
Right.
and one I think that recognized the importance of early childhood. There's a very specific question, but I think it's an important one. And Stephanie, I'll throw this one to you, which is, you know, what is mental health or what do mental health services look like in the 0 to 3 space? I mean, I think there are probably folks on the call who maybe have been veterans in the field, maybe don't have a sense of what that might entail. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So what we talk about when we talk about mental health consultants in the early childhood space, and these are people who have been specially trained to think about the mental health of infants and toddlers and young children in relation to their families. So a lot of that work around mental health consultation in the early years is really grounded in the relationship between parents and children. Another important aspect to when we talk about mental health consultation and what that support does, it also helps us as a field in terms of our discipline and suspension and expulsion rates. So some of the reasons why we have these high discipline rates that are disproportionately affecting Black and Brown children, some of the reasons why we have that is because of unmet needs that children might have, unmet mental health needs. And so funds and directed towards mental health consultation can help us provide those services that children need. And those funds also help us educate providers and teachers about how to support children and families when they are living under stressful conditions and need support. And it helps us teach those providers about how to de-bias themselves, because a lot of our problems that we have related to our suspension and our expulsion are really race-based. And so there's a lot of education that we have to do within our workforce so that people can sort of unlearn those biases.
So I hear you saying there's both a change in the way we provide care that doesn't add to the mental health challenges that children might be experiencing. And they're also very, very practical, like bringing mental health experts into settings to coach caregivers and families about how to change perhaps the way they're doing things in order to ensure that their children are in thriving kind of experiences. Is that fair?
That is fair, exactly.
Great. Amy, if you could answer this quickly, there are 2 questions about advocacy in particular, which I am excited about because, as you know, we've been trying to really focus in this area because of the important need. Obviously, there's an important need for good quality care, but if you can talk a little bit about routes to advocacy, ways in which people can be prepared to be advocates.
Absolutely. I can't believe I've been here in 41 minutes and I haven't talked about our 9:30 call yet. And our 9:30 call, we started during COVID. It started with kind of 20 groups calling in. We now have a 1,500 person invite list. We get 60 to 80 people every morning. The call is Monday through Thursday, 9:30 to 10 a.m. So it's only a half hour. We also are doing a monthly 9:30 call at night. Our next one for that is December 14th. And we at Strategies for Children are happy to help you plan out your advocacy routes, no matter what that looks like. So joining the early childhood agenda, joining our 9:30 call. We also have been able to create an advocacy network. We just have our third cohort, and this is a year-long experience for folks to join us and focus on a particular project. And I'll also mention the early childhood agenda. With our work groups that we have created lived experience leaders that are stipended positions to be part of this process because of their lived experience and perspective. And that's right. We've been recruiting and working with families first, parents who really are consumers of the system, but sometimes don't often have the chance to weigh in. So I'll add or you can please connect with me. We're happy to figure out direct routes for advocacy.
Great.
And I want something to say. So I want to also plug our master's program. So we were very intentional when we were designing that program and naming that program that advocacy was in the title of the degree program. And so if you want to further your career, right, and think and really learn those skills and about professional advocacy, please join our program.
Great. So there's some information here for members of the audience who may be interested in either our early childhood education preparation program or our program in leadership policy and advocacy for early childhood well-being. You can find that information in Karen Murphy. Dr. Karen Murphy is our program director, so reach out to her. A couple of shout outs to both SEED, Stephanie's Center on Ecology of Early Development. You see contact information there. And as was mentioned, the Institute for Early Childhood Well-Being, which Stephanie and Amy are both involved in, but also works across BU and across the community to focus on more than just early education and care, but all of the factors that impact early childhood thriving. So I want to thank you both. I think the importance of your influence at the state level is reassuring, I think, for people like me who care very much about what's happening to young children, and also puts a fine point on the importance of young children's well-being on our overall state as an economy, as a good place to live, et cetera. So thank you both for being part of this. If we can go to the next slide, I just want to make sure that folks know that we have upcoming webinars like this, one on December 14th that will focus on college-going age students. We're thrilled to welcome Dr. Anthony Abraham Jack, a new faculty member here at BU Wheelock, and the inaugural faculty director of the Newberry Center, which focuses on first-generation college students. And we'll talk about how to create a welcoming campus for all students. And then on January 18th, we'll be joined by Drs. Kayleen Stephen and Jerry Whitmore Jr. to talk